News Group, and welcome to our broadcast. The latest saga over a new stadium for the Raiders, and just as important, where is this new stadium going to be? Is it going to be in Oakland, Las Vegas, Los Angeles? I mean, who knows? But hopefully we can get a little clarity here. Joining me today is sports franchise expert Andy Dolich. He's been with us most of the way through this parade of uncertainty. Welcome, Andy.
Good afternoon, Steve and Dave.
All right. And also joining me is Bay Area News Group Oakland reporter David DeBolt. Hi, David.
Hey, Steve. Good to be here.
Thanks. Well, we've been waiting for some kind of push from the East Bay concerning an offer to build a stadium for the Raiders. A while back, Las Vegas put up an impressive offer with a new dome stadium, with the Nevada legislature chipping in $750 million and funds coming from elsewhere. And so, but an investment group headed by former NFL stars Ronnie Lott and Rodney Peete stepped forward with a pitch that got thumbs up from both the Alameda County Supervisors and the Oakland City Council, which is a feat in itself. David was there when it went down last week. David, what does this proposal entail?
Well, yeah, we there's two meetings last Tuesday. First, the County Board of Supervisors and then City Council, which both approved a term sheet, and we'll begin sort of getting into the details of the negotiations with Ronnie Lott and his group. It's a $1.3 billion development project with money coming from Ronnie Lott and his investment group, the Fortress Investment money management firm. We don't really have a lot of the details about, what all the plan's going to entail, but the sort of the keystone of it is this new stadium, this 55,000 seat football stadium. And moving forward, they're going to be in intense negotiations over the next weeks and months, and we'll have a better idea of what it's going to turn out to be. Okay.
Well, Andy, I mean, you've been saying Viva Las Vegas quite a bit lately. What does this proposal, could it possibly slow things down as far as the Raiders going to Las Vegas?
If I heard you correctly, we're talking about the latest proposal by the Lott Group, the city, and the county. The good news is that there's a game plan. There still needs to be some I's dotted and T's crossed in the game. Clearly, there's a game plan in Las Vegas with money as part of the plan. And I also think that it's somewhat different than either Oak or Las Vegas. I believe we've heard from Executive Eric Grubman, he did not exactly give the Oakland plan a thumbs up, which is a cautionary tale. But again, until their agenda item for the Raiders ask their colleagues to, I think this kind of conversation that we've had, as I've said before, this is like agreeing to build a new manufacturing 6th Avenue, but you don't have anything to plan, because the Raiders, short of us not knowing discussions that are going on, have not engaged with the city, the county, or the Lott Group in any specifics that I've heard of in terms of being a part of the Oakland deal.
Okay, David, what do you see as good and bad with this proposal?
Well, I think, having the backing of Ronnie Lott, who's a respected man, in the football world and sort of just in the Bay Area, you know, having his support and his cachet is a benefit. There is some money that is being. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, David, you're fine.
Okay. The public money that's being used for this 350 million, 200 million, which is a bond, 150 million, which is what the land is appraised at. One council member of Belgian expressed, you know, great concern over whether at some point the city would be the backstop and have to, you know, cover those costs if finances fall short. Ronnie Lott and his team have said that Fortress Investments is prepared to, you know, take care of any cost overruns, or if revenues don't materialize. But, you know, given what happened with the move back in 95, 96 and the current debt that's, you know, still existing from those renovations, there is a lot of resistance about, you know, using any public money, even if it's bonds.
David, a question for you from me on that shortfall, which is very, very hard to predict in the future, like any of this is. Is that contractually obligated in what the city and the county have agreed to with the lot group, or is that something for further negotiation where Fortress and Lot would basically backstop any future losses?
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that what they've agreed on so far, none of it is binding. They would still have to work that out. But, you know, Fortress has expressed, you know, at least verbally to the city that they are prepared to backstop revenue shortfalls. But that's going to be like, you know, a major point of these negotiations, you know, to convince city and county leaders that, you know, they won't be on the hook.
Right, because we've sort of gone from, and we realize it's the real world, but we've gone from Mayor Schaaf talking about $0 to a $350 million number, knowing that it's much more complicated than that in terms of how the money is generated and how it's backstopped. So I was curious, and I think that's an important point, Steve, to point out that even though there's an agreement, this is not an absolutely legally binding document that at this point puts anybody, you know, in a scenario where they could lose hundreds of millions, unless I'm missing it.
Well, I think also another concern is having a third party involved in all of this. That hasn't gone so well in previous. That's
an understatement, Steve. I mean, Forest City, a very well respected developer, nothing. Regency Capital, nothing. Floyd Kephart, I think we'd say that really didn't go very swimmingly, nothing. And now this is the fourth. To me, unless you have absolute certainty, buy-in, complete upfront transparency that the Raiders are for this, I think there's a gigantic question mark and dollar sign above the ability to do this.
Yeah, I would agree with Andy on that. I mean, if you listen to Eric Grubman's comments from last week, you know, the NFL's stadium point man, he said we don't like, you know, third party, you know, developers being involved. They want this to be, you know, a two-party conversation between the city and the franchise. Unfortunately, here in Oakland, with the city and county refusing to put up significant public money, and the Raiders saying they don't have, you know, they can't do this on their own, a third party has become necessary here, and it's not been successful. It's not been successful in other places, and you know, if the NFL doesn't like it, then it could potentially be a problem for this local group.
Yeah, but David, I gather the mood among city leaders was pretty good as far as, you know, both the county and the city giving their thumbs up. So, I mean, everybody kind of jumped in. But did you get also a feeling that this was an 11th hour, hey, this is it, or we're going to lose the Raiders type deal?
It certainly seems that way. I mean, we're on the verge of having an NFL, you know, owners vote about the relocation to Las Vegas, and you know, it's been years now, years of failed efforts, and the clock is ticking, and this, appears to be Oakland's last shot. Maybe Andy has more to say on that, but yeah, I would agree. This is probably the final proposal to keep him here.
Andy, what do you think?
Ticking clock, I'm thinking of Edgar Allan Poe in terms of how this might come out, and ongoing problems that ultimately have to be solved. We know that Vegas has the most money on the table. Review ready to roll. Still many more questions in Oakland. We haven't even raised. Scenario is with the Oakland A's. And so we still have plenty of latitude to discuss this conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that for this proposal, David kind of touched on a little bit at the beginning of the broadcast, how much time this is going to take for this to run its course. I mean, I don't know if the NFL is that patient. Do you, Andy?
Question I didn't get. Can you try that again?
Yeah, Andy. My question was that this Oakland proposal is going to take a lot of time to run its course, and I'm not sure the NFL is going to be that patient.
I would agree with you, but again, underscoring, the great work that David's done and many other journalists to try to figure out exactly what's going on in meetings that none of us get to attend and decisions that none of us get to make. I happen to believe this latest with Vegas and Oakland. Clearly, Eric Grubman is doing what he should be doing for the league, and that is to try to get the best deal that he can out of Oakland, and that's not there yet. We'll see how the city ultimately reacts to that, and the Lot and Fortress Group. And I do think that the NFL stands possibly in a position where they do not make any kind of decision on the Raiders for the coming months, even though the Raiders have said they're going to put a request on the agenda. That doesn't necessarily mean the NFL has to react on it, I don't think.
Hey, Andy, I had a question for you too. Doesn't the NFL have, some sort of policy or standards when it comes to teams relocating from a larger market to a smaller market? And in this case, the Raiders leaving Oakland for Las Vegas would be that scenario.
I think the ultimate bottom line, as we've already talked about, is how you increase the asset value of each of the teams. And if somebody can make an argument, David, you tell me, but I saw some comments that I think were attributed to Mr. Grubman that actually refuted some of the economic upside of Oakland and talked positively about the economic upside of Las Vegas just as a market. And I think if you speak to any economist, you know that that is just not factual in size of market, disposable income, type of market, sports background. So I don't really know where that was coming from. Again, it could be another leverage point for the city and the county and the Lot Group. But yes, if I'm an owner of an NFL team and I'm the commissioner and his executives, our job is to maximize the value of our team. And ultimately the league. Would a move to Las Vegas do that? I think we've decided that it doesn't, but I have a personal bias towards Oakland, and for a lot of reasons do not believe it's a positive. But Mark has potentially $1.4 billion in the state's money and in Sheldon Adelson's money. And as I look at the Oakland deal, guaranteed $0.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna speak from a fan standpoint. real quick here. I'm seeing sold-out games at the Coliseum. We're seeing a team that is now going to the playoffs. Quite frankly, could win the division if the Raiders win out. Popularity is no question here. In previous sports franchise movements, the main problem problems have been generating revenue, a fan base that's going in the tank, and my problem here, I guess, is we're seeing what seems to be a very successful franchise, and yet we could be seeing the potential of the first Super Bowl champion to leave the city in NFL history. Can you guys address that?
Well, I'll jump in first, David, since I have more white hair, if that's okay. First and foremost, I want to be at that press conference in Oakland where Mark Davis, Roger Goodell, Eric Grubman have to explain to the fans of Oakland that their team is moving right after the Super Bowl parade. I definitely want to be at that one. Now, is that all that fanciful? No, it really isn't. Not until they're out of it. You also have a scenario where you have a tarp on that stadium. You know, you talk about this team at an all-time positive, fans are celebrating, and rightly so. They have all the factors. They have a star on defense, a star on offense. They've got a great coach. They put a team together. The other team in the marketplace is suffering through a historical, horrendous season. And you don't rip that tarp off. I know there's NFL rules that says you can't change seating configuration within a season. But you mean to tell me that in one phone call to the league, you couldn't take that tarp off and sell 11,000 seats for the game against the Colts? That's ridiculous. So there's multiple games being played here. What's most important, David, as you talked about, the game on the field, which is most important. The Raiders have turned the corner. They have an excellent product. There is a solution to build here. Nobody's figured it out yet. And that is the tragic part about this, if this team ever moves to another city.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to throw out a reader question. First off, from Mike, concerning the situation in Las Vegas, he simply asked, "Isn't Adelson a third party?"
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he is a third party. And when Grubman made those comments last week, I know a lot of local leaders here were stunned and felt that Oakland was being singled out for some reason. He hasn't really addressed that third party issue out in Las Vegas. I don't know, Andy, if you heard differently.
No, I think that's correct, as you put it, but he is a third party that is part of the deal. Now, you could say that Fortress and, Ronnie Lott are third parties, along with the $750 million that has been guaranteed by the state through the hotel tax. So yes, it's definitely a gray area that if I'm Oakland, I'm questioning it because of Adelson's lifelong involvement in the gaming industry. And is that something, even if he is a third party, he's a third party at $650 million. And for anybody to think that he won't have input on that team is living in a world that is in another galaxy.
Okay, I have another reader question. This is from Big Bend, USA. And it's a pretty long one, so I'm going to shorten it a little bit here. He mentions that this is not a knock against Vegas, but in the Bay Area is a much more dynamic market, given its size, high wealth level. It's the nation's third largest metro economy, on and on. But he mentions something about Levi's Stadium. And he says, obviously, the league cannot force Davis to move to Levi's, but because of such potential being the most economical solution, it says, can Levi's come into play at some point? Perhaps given the trouble the Niners are having with Santa Clara?
Well, I'd just say, based on my time with the Niners, Big Ben is right on time. Absolutely, they could, but Al Davis ruled that out categorically. Mark has said no. I have a difficult time believing that. We haven't even talked about San Diego and what happens with San Diego if they go to Englewood, or if they choose not to go to Englewood. Does that provide an opportunity for the Raiders, who have supposedly been pre-approved to go to Englewood? How would you ever convince people if the Vegas deal didn't happen and the Raiders decided that they would go to Englewood when they could go 32 miles from Harbor Bay to Levi's? I want to be at that press conference too. So you look at the Jets and the Giants, and we talked about before. You look at the possibility of two teams in Englewood, which it seems that's the way the Chargers are leaning. And I would say if Mark Davis turned around and brought in a partner for $1.3 billion, I'm not talking about a third party. I'm talking about somebody that had equity in the team, which Mark has said he absolutely is not going to do. He could build that stadium right in Oakland with that partner. And boy, there's enough people with $1.3 billion burning a hole in their private pocket that would do that deal in a short period of time.
Okay, I have another question from a viewer. This is from Will, and he asks, in case it hasn't been addressed, is Fortress asking for part ownership of the Raiders for the cash they're willing to put up? I'll put that to both of you.
I'll let David go first.
You know, Steve, I couldn't hear your question. You were cutting out.
Okay, is Fortress asking for part ownership of the Raiders for the cash they're willing to put up?
I think it's a great possibility. I mean, that hasn't been discussed publicly yet, but I think, you know, with the amount of money they're putting into the project, it'd only be fair for them to, you know, ask for a stake. Whether or not Mark Davis is willing to do so remains to be seen. I know in Las Vegas, when Eldon wanted 20% cut, Mark wasn't happy about that. But, you know, I don't know at this point. It's kind of too early to say.
Okay. Okay. Here's another viewer question. This one's from Ron. He asks, isn't the TV market a moot point when Raider Nation is a national brand?
I don't necessarily understand the question of a TV market. If the question is assuming that no matter where the Raiders played, their TV numbers would be just as strong, I would say no, not the way ratings are changing every day in terms of digital devices and all that. And I don't necessarily agree that Nation's numbers in Las Vegas would be equal or higher than Oakland's numbers. Okay.
Well, at an NFL owners meeting last week, they did approve a proposal for the Chargers to pay half of the location fee and enter into a lease agreement to allow a move to Los Angeles. And at that same meeting, some of the owners were pretty skeptical about the Raiders staying in Oakland and seemed a little bit more receptive about a move to Las Vegas. What do those signs tell us? I guess it tells us that the owners want things resolved with the Raiders sooner than later.
Steve, I'd have to turn to David. The audio gremlins got your question. It was a long one. Unfortunately, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, same here. It was all...
Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. I'll make it shorter. All Are we getting signs from the NFL owners that they want the Raiders situation resolved sooner than later?
My quick answer is no. There's no reason they have to solve this anytime soon. And,
Yeah.
unless somebody is litigating against the league, which is always a possibility because they're a target, but this has been going on for a long time. Clearly, there's much more fire, enthusiasm, deal points that are occurring in both markets and considerations in others like San Diego and what they do. But no, I don't think the league has to be concerned with timing. That's just my view.
Okay, I'm going to go with one last question here. Mark Davis seems determined to go to Las Vegas. What can possibly change his mind to stay in Oakland?
Well, I can start. I mean, if what Ronnie Lott and the city and county negotiate is something where there's going to be enough private money and a little public subsidy, that could lure him back. But I don't know if there is anything. He hasn't met with Fortress or Ronnie. He hasn't met with the city or county in months, and he continues to say he's negotiating with Las Vegas. So unless somehow that plan unravels, he's looking at Las Vegas.
And I would say, to close this out, Steve, again, all hypothetical and theoretical, as we've talked about, because we're not Mark, we're not the league, we're not the commissioner, we're just observers. Until the NFL says, no, you're not going to Vegas in a vote or delivered some other way, you're back to Oakland, which essentially is what happened with Carson when it looked like the Raiders were going to Carson. And Mark has no real other opportunity in the next time period other than Oakland. If the Lott deal continues to gain traction, that's how I think they stay in Oakland.
Okay, and then on that note, we'll be ending our broadcast right here. David DeBolt, Andy Dolich, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm certain that the saga is not over with yet, so we'll be back for the next development, whatever that might be. So thank you for joining.
I'd like to say, happy holidays to all the Raider fans that have put up to this. They do have a Christmas present in the playoffs and hopefully a lot longer than that. And my Christmas wish is that someday they won't listen to you and me and David and anybody else talking about this, because there'll be a new deal for the Raiders to stay in Oakland for a long time.
I have to agree. My sentiments exactly. So Merry Christmas to you, Andy. Merry Christmas,
Okay.
David. And thank you for joining us.